again repeat what we have been calling for the past several weeks. This is the appointment of the Local Government Commission and the appointment of the Public Procurement Commission. We find it very strange that the government, particularly the president, will make or made the return of local government democracy, as he puts it, a centerpiece of his government's achievements so far, and would not take it to its logical conclusion. We differ substantially from the explanations he has given about why local government democracy was thwarted. The long delays that we've had in the joint group, the PVP-PNC group, that could not for 11 years almost of the work come up with a model that was acceptable to both parties, which led us to move unilaterally to the parliament at some stage because we could not continue with that process. And then, even then, when we moved to the parliament, Mr. Corbyn at that time said there were some preconditions that for support. And even at that late stage, we sought to get consensus before we held the local government elections. But that's all water under the bridge. We've now had local government elections. We've had the stealing of the votes of many of those NDCs where APNU chairpersons were installed in NDCs, several NDCs, where they did not get the majority of the seats in those NDCs, nor did they get the majority of votes. And now they're run by APNU chairpersons and vice chairpersons. And we believe that that is indicative of how the rhetoric of return to local government democracy has been thwarted. But we've moved on to the Local Government Commission. The minister keeps making some ridiculous excuses. We've submitted our nominees, and then at some stage he wrote me and he said, you have to consult with I wrote him on behalf of the People's Progressive Party, the nominees of the PVP, and he said, you have to consult with the parties in Parliament, the opposition parties in Parliament. There's just the People's Progressive Party in opposition in Parliament. Yet he has used this frivolous approach to thwart what I think is their reluctance to put the body in place, because having that body in place will reduce the capricious and the dictatorial diktats the diktats are by themselves dictatorial, that come from the ministry. And so there's reluctance to do this. And similarly, with the Public Procurement Commission, for years they have criticized the People's Progressive Party for not putting in the Public Procurement Commission in place, although they were not supportive in the parliament, because you needed agreement at the parliamentary level to initiate the process or to conclude the process. In a few months after we took over the chairmanship of the Public Accounts Committee, we managed to get the nominees an agreement in Parliament and get the nominees to the President. You'd recall Nagamutu saying in his very profound letter that the nominees are now with the President. And this was about 2 months ago. and the president comes to the parliament, talks about accountability, talks about the public procurement commission, about it to be established, and can't find half an hour of his time to swear in the members, which is critical to move the entire process forward. And again, the excuse is, oh, we don't have the terms of reference. But the terms of reference cannot be developed by the executive. They have to be developed by the Public Procurement Commission itself, and a significant part of the terms of reference is already reflected in the Constitution. So, again, this is another excuse. And one wonders why. One wonders why, having gone through, is it that they're having second thoughts now? Is it that they're having second thoughts on the establishment of these bodies? We've heard a lot about the green economy from the president. And he criticized the LCDS for not being very profound, but he has nothing so far to replace it with. No comprehensive strategy apart from National Tree Day, talking vaguely about greening Bartica, talking about renewable energy in a vague manner, but nothing specific to replace what was a comprehensive strategy, indigenously developed, although we relied on foreign help for technical inputs. So because of the absence of the people to put a strategy together, because of no vision for the green economy outside of these tree planting activities, they have now decided to farm out the intellectual work to a foreign group. So they have gone to the UNDP and asked the UNDP to help them develop the green economy strategy. And so what are we going to have? We're going to have some foreign consultants come in to create the green strategy for the government. Now, I have my views about many of the people who come in to do these things. If they're not properly managed, if they're not, the vision is not defined for them to work within, then they run amok. Foreign consultants have been probably the cause, bad ones, have been the cause of much of the underdevelopment in the developing world. And my fear is because of the absence of that vision here and the technical capabilities, we're going to have a document developed somewhere else without any regard to the specifics of Guyana. We have already seen a tendency to move from balanced development, sustainable development, to conservation. The approach has, so the forestry sector, you have logging done, but you also have the sale of forest carbon. That was the balance we had. So you can generate the employment and from logging activities, but they're done in a sustainable manner, and you still get the environmental benefits. As we have done, we sold $250 million worth of forest carbon to Norway, and 180 million has already been made available to us. The balanced approach, sustainable development. They now have moved to conservation. So it's chasing away logging activities, etc., promising another 2 million hectares to conservation. If the new strategy is dominated by an approach on conservation, then the country loses out in the big scheme of things globally. It loses out. And our path to prosperity becomes even more difficult. More people will lose jobs here in Guyana. And so it is utterly disgusting that they will farm out, having criticized our LCDS, which came out of tons and tons of consultations here. We got McKinsey and company to work with us to develop the numbers to justify their strategy. But we had tons and tons of consultations developing a series of activities, much of which the president has mentioned in his speech too. So they've taken over some of the activities, like the Center for Biodiversity Studies. That's a project funded by the LCDS. But he said now it will go to Iwakrama. That's the only new thing. It would be located at Iwakrama rather than at the university campus here in Georgetown. And so it is a very worrying thing about the government farming this out. Now that brings me to the next issue about energy. Renewable energy. We have had a spate of blackouts. I've said to ministers privately, I said, if you do not make the decision now, in fact, that was about 8 months back, I said, if you do not make investment decisions now, then you're going to have consequences down the road, because the energy supply will probably, the demand will outstrip supply. And even if you're comfortable with capacity now, that the capacity we have, the installed capacity, is more than what the peak demand is, that you will not have that capacity operating fully at all times. My big worry is that they have now terminated the Wärtsilä O&M contract, the operation and maintenance contract. Wärtsilä operated and maintained those sets, some of which are pretty old, but we had a significant, sometimes as much as 95% of rated capacity being available. If you switch it to now, my fear is we do not have all the skills, but the management as well as the local skills, to keep those sets producing at the same levels. We're going to see more failures of engines. We're going to see more problems with maintenance. That's one. Secondly, no investment decision about new capacity. So they've effectively killed the hydropower, but then they have now, in a mad scramble the last week, resurrected the wind farm project, or brought to light what was being done in the dark, the negotiations about the wind farm project. But let me tell you what is happening. Now, Norway, we're going to raise this issue with Norway again. The Norwegians are concluding a study now about the Myla hydropower project. Whether this project was a good one, whether the location chosen was a good one, and whether there was, I don't know if they're going to talk about the corruption, because we haven't heard the government press that case. But Norway is doing a fact-based assessment of this project, because so far you've only had a political assessment of the project. We pointed out that the power from the hydro will be 10 cents per kilowatt hour on average over the life of the project for the first 20 years, and then drop to about 2 cents per kilowatt hour. In the budget last year, we heard, this is what Jordan said. The government is negotiating a power purchase agreement with a private developer, this year's budget, for a $50 million US wind farm at Hope Beach. This facility is expected to provide an additional 25 megawatts of power to the national grid. Currently, the Guyana Power and Light generates power at an average weighted cost of 28 cents per kilowatt hour. The new project will likely offer GPL energy at less than half that cost, which will translate to lower electricity tariff to consumers. Now, we pointed out that his 28 cents per kilowatt hour that he mentioned in this budget was absolutely wrong. It was 11 cents at that time because of the lower electricity rate. That's one fact. They defended it, and then they had to concede, but didn't concede publicly that he had a wrong number in his budget. So they were negotiating at about half of the 28 cents to make it look that the wind farm was feasible, and a good for Guyana at 14 cents. We don't know what the final price will be. But coming back to what is wrong with this. One, you have a Norwegian assessment that is ongoing that will be submitted shortly about the Amila. Two, IDB was doing an energy mix study, which we haven't seen because it's a state secret. Even the IDB is complicit in this. I think the IDB has this report. They should be making the report available to everyone. The report, we gather, came out in July, was completed in July or June. It was completed. It hasn't been available to the public as yet. But the Minister of Finance presented his budget long before June. So long before the energy mix study that the government claimed would guide them was completed, the Minister of Finance said they were negotiating a power purchase deal. So the energy mix study, I'm sure, may just baptize this, because these foreign consultants tend to do that, what is already there in the system. We have to look at that. We don't know what the energy mix study is spoken about as yet. But there was no public tender for this facility. There was no public tender to supply this. And Lloyd Singh, a known financier of the AFC, where Patterson is the General Secretary of the AFC, is now negotiating with, imagine, a man who builds the AFC headquarters, as publicly acknowledged by Ramjatan, is now negotiating with the General Secretary of the AFC for a power purchase deal that was never tendered and that was announced long before the power mix study had come in place. This is, I hope the international organizations are looking at this, because they love to talk about how they don't tolerate corruption in developing countries. But this smacks of corruption, and it's a 50 million US facility. But let me tell you, even if they go ahead with this, the People's Progressive Party is not bound to respect anything that is done in this manner. Any power purchase agreement negotiated in secrecy by related parties will not necessarily be respected. That's one. And two, this will not solve GPL's problems, the blackout problems, because they're presenting this as the solution. Because if they buy 25 megawatts of power from the wind farm, and just imagine 3 days or 10 times in the day that the wind stops blowing and it goes down to zero, because it has to have a certain speed of the wind to turn the turbines. Just imagine 3 or 10 times in the day that happens. What will be the backup power that will kick in? That is why we said that buying wind is buying energy, not capacity. Hydro is both energy and capacity. This seems to escape them. And so we're going to be spending tons of money. This is a corrupt transaction. So their only foray into renewable energy, as the president says it, is a corrupt deal. Corrupt deal. And Patterson needs to give answers. He needs to give answers too about the airport project that he has refused to give to the parliament, although he promised it. He said, when we asked about what's the square footage now, because they reduced the size of the airport, kept the price, but reduced the size. And I heard it's a substantial reduction in the size of the airport, the terminal building, and the chutes that lead you out to the aircraft. Reduce the numbers of those and the footprint of the building. And he must do this excluding what I heard they're saying now they want to rehabilitate the old one, because you have to exclude that. That was not part of the project. Because they will include that to show square footage costs, because that's what I heard they're thinking about doing. That to include the old terminal building, the rehabilitation, to show that the square footage is the same. But it was a new terminal building. The original plan was to pull down the old terminal building and build an entirely new terminal building. They have to compare like with like. So we would like to see that. Because that ministry, as the Auditor General report has just pointed out, is becoming a black hole. And there are tons of people who have to go there. Anyhow, let me don't go on that. But so this power, this solution for power that they have come up with to end all of these blackouts, not going to help. Not going to help. They've killed the hydropower project. The only renewable thing is a corrupt deal. And we are going to, on a daily basis, scrutinize this. We're going to press them hard to get the details of this contract. And I hope that the media will ask questions. How is it that you are going to go with someone without looking at the competitive nature of this? They use some old MOU that the PPP had with these people. But the PPP had moved away from that because the nature of the project changed. And secondly, this was when a miler would have been built, then we would have had the capacity to handle the purchase of energy too. So it would have been a balancing power. A miler would have been the balancing power. In the absence of a miler or substantial investment in fossil fuel, this can't work. And so I noticed that's their thing about the old PPP MOUs, the old ones that suit them, like the hospital, that they can go with those. Those are not corrupt. But let's move on. I'm not going to speak much more about the green economy because I think it's just all rhetoric. All rhetoric. On the economy itself, we have had various explanations from the government about why things have slowed down. And they have slowed down. Everyone recognizes this. So they have to, first of all, it's our neighbors have slowed down. So what's the big deal? But we have to point out, well, those neighbors they relied on oil and gas for most of their income. You have saved close to $300 million per annum, 60 billion Guyana dollars in importing fuel. You should be doing better, not worse, because you've saved more money on importing fuel. Unlike Trinidad or Suriname or Venezuela that have lost substantial chunks of their revenue because of their drop in oil prices. Should be doing better. So they've moved away from that excuse now. The next thing is that they've been slowed down in global commodity prices, and that's true to some extent. That's true. But the third one now is new. That one, the PPP left them a bad economy and therefore the things can't happen. You know, we had to divert funds, etc., away from critical tasks. But when you look at the PPP economy, it was in fact, for 10 years straight, on average, it's the fastest growing economy in the Caribbean and possibly in the Western Hemisphere. Fastest growing in 10 years continuously through the recession. Sectors were doing well, most of the sectors in the economy. The revenue base was solid. It's now, what, over $160 billion, the recurrent revenue base. Things that they said were liability and we had stolen the funds, they found tens of billions of dollars in those accounts that are still sitting there. The reserves were close to 700 million US dollars. Solid economy. We left a pipeline of projects that was worth over 800 million US dollars, and possibility of new loans, etc., from India, etc., of another maybe 800 to $1 billion. We left a project, the Amila project, that could have brought in 750 million US dollars of investment. The oil and gas was found under the PPP. We left them with that too. We left them with 2 new gold mines that have been producing all the new gold. How could you say that the economy was in a bad shape? That when you inherited it, you have to be sick. You have to be delusional to say this. So that's the new explanation. Oh, we had to spend some money on Gaisuko, so we can't spend money on workers. You know, we can't pay the public servants enough. We can't pay this group enough. But you're busy paying ministers, you know, and this whole thing about wages and salaries. Imagine, you're giving 1 to 10%, because people don't talk about it, they use the 10%. But the 1% to 10%, and somewhere around there, you have managers. So as you go up, say, in the army, you go up the rank. Those people are not going to get 10%. They're going to get maybe 3%, 2%, 1%. As you go up in the police force, it's the same thing. You argued that we needed in the cabinet good managers. So we needed a 50%, so we had to pay the managers better. And in that case, you're giving the managers of these entities, the people who run these places, a paltry 2% and 1%. So the logic that you apply to yourself doesn't work for those people. So you do something that's popular, and we don't have a problem with people getting 10%. They should be getting 20% based on the promise that these people made. When a 5%, actually, that's what the promise they made. But you are denuding the managers of the salary increase. So you should ask people in the management levels whether they're happy. But they took the money. And so they spent $1 billion on the stadium. You have money to waste, but you're griping about putting some in Gaisuko. Putting some money in Gaisuko. Now, another explanation has emerged recently. Having failed on all of those things, they're saying, oh, it must have been the drug money that was keeping the economy alive. And so they have like psycho funds like the one in Nagamutu's office. I saw him writing, you know, these lackeys, who now writing a very profound article about the transition from narco state to something else. I don't know what. But the lackeys have now started spinning a new line. Oh, it must be the drug money, that we've cleaned up the country of the drug money. Where is evidence of that cleaning? Where is evidence that you have stopped the 15,000 ounces of gold that you claim was exported every year from Guyana illegally. 15,000 ounces per week, rather. Where is that? Where is there evidence in this? But let's look at what is being affected. It's not the drug money that's causing the slowdown. Rice is down substantially, production. Sugar production is down. Logging has practically collapsed. And I saw Barama now just exiting the country once again. Another investor will leave the country. Where are those 800 people going to work? Are they drug dealers when they don't have money now to spend in the shops? Is that not contributing to the slowdown? Where are those people going? So that has collapsed. Small miners getting a terrible time. The markets, everything is slowed down. That is the reality. Disaggregate the economy sector by sector, and you will see it's not drug money, it's that production is shrinking. Production is shrinking. And there are no new investments because of the public pronouncements of these governments. They have not had a single new investment of import. So if you don't have money flowing into the country in investments, local people don't want to invest. The sectors are doing badly in terms of production. That's where the slowdown is. Not because drug money doesn't circulate. You tell the people who have lost their jobs that they were working, this is because of drug money. Ask the taxi drivers about what's going on. They will tell you more. So this is the new narrative now. Oh, it's drug money. It is an explanation for an incompetent government. Incompetent government on the economy. And what is dangerous is this guy is saying, the same psychophant, that this is about, those people are not getting the drug money anymore. They were watching people spying on the police and all kinds of things. So they're turning to crime. So that is why the crime rate has escalated. On one hand, we hear that no, there's no escalation in crime. Things are going so well, we've controlled crime, etc. And then he, in his own article, I think he let it slip that a lot of those people, but erroneously so, blaming the drug trade, are going into crime. The crime is growing rapidly because of the disintegration of morale in the police force. It's happening already, and they're not sure about what the president wants. Nobody is sure about what the president wants. And then, on the other, it has never been this bad. People are robbing now hospitals. They went into 2 hotels. When you start going into hotels, robbing hotels, then that sends a strong signal for tourism. On tourism, if criminals can go into a hotel and rob it, soon they may go to funeral parlors. Who knows? The way it's going. But on the one hand, you're hearing that there's no increase in crime, and then the psychophant contradicts them and says that it is happening. That is why it's happening. I've had cause to speak with a few people, young doctors, those that came back recently. And it seems as though this government is intent almost on not just shooting itself in the foot, but on destroying the long-term prospects for change in the country, destroying it in such a short period. We cannot accumulate social capital unless you act in certain manner. If you ask me about what our healthcare strategy was, I can spend maybe half a day talking to you about it. But its basic elements were three in nature. One, because, and based on our history, that we had to improve facilities. So we built new hospitals, several new hospitals, Linden, New Amsterdam, Lenora, all these places, ophthalmology centers, facilities. Secondly, we had to improve the availability of medical supplies and drugs. And so we did have problems occasionally with shortages, etc., but in the main, things were available. And the third one was personnel. How do you, in the face of maybe migration, how do you keep a critical mass of people who are trained in the health sector working and staying here? So I said to the cabinet, we had to train beyond even beyond our means, but beyond the migration curve. So we said 1,000 doctors, 2,000 nurses, and 200 medics. That was our target. And we started working with Fidel Castro, etc., to get this done. Once that had been completed, and we had enough doctors in the system, we would have then moved on to specialization. So a number of doctors would have gone off every year to do specialization once you get past the curve of getting enough doctors in the system. Because at one stage, we only had 153 doctors in the entire public health system. 153. So then now to get that number. That would have allowed us, once the numbers are in place, to move to preventative medicine, primary health care. Because when you deal with things like diabetes and hypertension, they have long-term consequences and costs if you tackle them early. So it was a plan. We made sure that we guarantee every single person who had completed the training that they had a job when they're finished. We didn't say we didn't have money. We said if you finished the training, you had a job in the public service. I'm told now that people are told that they don't have money. So even when you finish training, you're not guaranteed a job. Secondly, we said to people, you had to serve 5 years. There is an agreement with the government, a scholarship agreement, particularly those who have gone abroad, the medical student, that they will serve 5 years. So many of them became contract employees. Many did not want to go on the establishment because they only have 5 years to serve and then they will make a choice. This government is now demanding that they all go on the pensionable establishment, from what I'm told. That means all of these doctors now who are joining the system will lose their contract gratuity if they go on the pensionable establishment. If they opt after 5 years not to renew, then they would have lost the 5 years service once they go on the pensionable establishment, not getting their contract gratuity for 5 years. I'm told that those who have completed their 5 years are told now they can't have another contract with contract gratuity. They too will have to go on the pensionable establishment. This is going to cause major, major problems, dissatisfaction, and a loss of people again, the doctors. It's not a lot of money. It's maybe a couple $100 million in contract gratuity per year. If we can spend the money we spent on the stadium, that the White Elephant at Durban Park, would be able to pay the contract gratuity for the doctors, all the doctors, for 5 years. Why do we want to chase these people who we've invested in away from the system? And I hope having spoken about this, that they reconsider this, that it will cause major dissatisfaction in the sector among the doctors. It is going against many of them, this legitimate expectation they had that they would be hired on contract because their colleagues who preceded them were hired under that arrangement. And it could lead to a reversal of what we've had. That is, more doctors in the system. I hope that the government will not pursue this. In terms of Gaisuko, this government has been making a ton of excuses. We have said, if you look at they've been rolling out all of the debt. Look at how much debt Gaisuko has. And therefore, we can't, and we're putting money into Gaisuko. We can't do anything else. But I have spoken about this already. We're prepared to publicly disaggregate the debt. You will see that Gaisuko is carrying debt for which it has not been the major beneficiary. I've spoken about it already. The power plant in, the Wärtsilä power plant in Skeldon has been supplying GPL with power there, although it's on Gaisuko's books as a debt, been supplying GPL with power. There's so many other things. We're prepared to work that through. But to say, I wonder what the Nagamutu is saying. He had to go, you notice he had to go to India for approbation now, not anywhere in Berbice anymore. So let him go and talk to the sugar workers now. Let him tell them that after they promised them a 20% increase, he was drinking and eating duck and promising the people the same Sharma thing. You remember Sharma used to talk about who eats ducks in the bottom houses? Well, he was doing that. They promised the sugar workers 20% and no closure. Why is it that he sits in a cabinet now that has said for second year in a row, sugar workers are not going to get any salary increase? This is unconscionable, totally unconscionable. They should be ashamed of themselves. We can find money for everything under the sun, but you can't find money for the sugar workers. And so it smacks of politics in a serious way. I've noticed the radio licenses have been the major issue recently. And let me tell you my take on this whole thing. You remember the whole thing about the grenade? And my take on that, the options? Well, again, it's Glenn Lalle's creation. They've been seeking to get a radio license, the Kaichor News, for a while, Glenn Lal. So I think he's been promised this by his colleagues in the AFC because they're very close to the Nagamutu and Ramjatan and the others. They've been promised that when the government changes, he's going to get this. So 16 months has passed and he's now getting the payback for the extensive coverage he gave them. So he has to keep the issue in the public domain, and he has to create enough concerns so with the hope that it would be resolved in his favor. So one is that they're not canceling these licenses that Jagdeo gave to friends and families. Two, they're not giving new licenses. And then, because this is not happening, he goes after individuals in both entities. And knowing how thin-skinned Nagamutu is, he gives him a little criticism, so hopes that he will act. So the whole thing is contrived. It is to put pressure on the government to probably illegally cancel the licenses of people and then, by extension, to give him a license. Now, the friends and family thing, this could be tested in court. This could be tested in court whether we acted illegally or not. That's one. Two, I noticed they don't mention Maxwell Tom. I see a couple of things. Rockcliffe Christie, Alfonso, the Fergusons, Rudy Grant, Haslin Graham, all these people who receive licenses too. Because it's supposed to be friends and families of Jagdeo. So these are my family too. Well, today I will publicly embrace them. That these people are now friends and families of Jagdeo, and they're entitled to a public embrace. And I have no apology about that to give to anyone about that. Thank you.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, you listen to the statement by the opposition leader. Now we'll open to question. Who will be the first?
Sir, in your opening statement, you spoke about not honoring any agreement between the government and the wind farm, the principles for the wind farm. A clarification, are you speaking about a change in administration, or would you be challenging it as any objection?
Well, first of all, we'd have to look at it. If we find that it's particularly egregious, we will challenge it, as we have done in the courts, and use every means that's available to us to expose it. And if they persist as this government tends to do, like with all of the corrupt deals that they've had, they continue, they whitewash a lot of these things. Cabinet subcommittees are formed to review cabinet decisions, etc., like the infamous bond. If they persist with it, then we will have no choice but to review it.
You have a question?
Yes.
Abina? Yes. Okay.
Just a few quick questions, sir. In your opening statement, you spoke about the slowdown in the economy. I'd like to know what is your solution to fixing this issue. Secondly, you spoke about, and I quote, crimes escalating rapidly. Where is the increased evidence of this? And thirdly, you spoke about the troubles regarding Guy Suko. Would it be safe to say that this is a trouble that both you and, well, your regime and the government should share, since Guy Suko's trouble didn't start 17
Sure.
months ago?
Yeah.
And thirdly, not thirdly, I think it's fourth
That's
right now.
true, yeah.
You made mention of Mr. Glenn Lau being promised a radio license by the current government. Where is your evidence of this as well? And if you don't have any evidence, is this just speculation? That's it for now.
Okay, sure. On Gaisuko, I agree absolutely with what you're saying, that the troubles with Gaisuko started some time back. And a lot of it had to do with the cut in the European Union prices, where we lost about $40 million per annum of revenue. So that was major. But we asked you, this is what we said. The government, when they decided to close Wales, I said we are prepared to sit with them and talk about a future for the industry, because we believe that it has a future. And their claim that they are not aware of the extent of the debt is at best disingenuous, at best. Because there was a subcommittee chaired by Carl Greenidge in the in the last, when they were in, I think it's the Economic Services Committee of Parliament, where Gaisuko was required in the past government under Ramatar to go, I think 2 or 3 times to appear before that committee to discuss its plans. And the debt situation of Gaisuko was thoroughly probed at the subcommittee. So they knew that Gaisuko had some debt and the dire times that the industry was going through. Why do you think we campaigned that we will put $20 billion into Gaisuko the first year? We campaigned on that. I don't know if you remember our posters, but if you look at the manifesto, you will see that. We had to be extremely stupid not to say we will put $20 billion into the industry in the first year if there was no problem. Why would you need to do that? But we didn't hide it. It was there. If they're so incompetent as not to know when they're in opposition, not to read the documents that they had, or to understand the implication of a party that is campaigning at the election, the ruling party at that time, saying we will put 20 billion into the industry, and then come and like little crybaby said, oh, we didn't know this, we didn't know this, then I can't be blamed for that, their incompetence. But they knew all along. They had to know that the industry was in trouble. We said this industry has, if you look at it from several perspectives, but if you look at it purely from financial perspective, you would see the losses. But when we looked at other critical industries to communities, we looked at them from an economic perspective. The economic impact and social impact on communities. And this is why when the Alcoa walked away from the Berbice River, we opted to take back the industry rather than close it, the bauxite industry. This is why when Minproc was hired by Hoyt to terminate, either to get an investor or shut down the industry that we found there, the Australian form, we opted not to do that. That we decided to look for a strategic investor and at the same time pump money into alternatives, the call center, road into West Matuka, the incubator for small businesses, a whole range of other subsidiaries, the small loans facility, etc. That's the approach. If you look at the impact of Gaisuko on some communities, it's disproportionate in Berbice. It's the main earner of disposable income. In West Dem, Wales was. So you're going to create significant hardships that flow through the entire community if you look at this narrowly. And that's what we're arguing. And so let's have a broader look at the industry. And we were prepared to, we made that offer. Now it's not for us, they're in power, for us to go and say, here is our plan. They should welcome that. But they were hell-bent on taking this decision. They put Clive Thomas on the thing. Really, I know Clive Thomas may have had his days, but not anymore. To not anymore, really. To the people. So we are still open to that. We're still open to it if they have an approach that is seriously constructive, not a political approach where the president makes the decision or a small group in the cabinet, not the board. That's why we opted not to participate, although they didn't invite us directly to go on the board. Because the decisions are not made here, or even at the Ministry of Agriculture. Glenlal? Imagine the Kaichor News asking me for evidence of anything. Can you imagine the irony of that? Can you imagine the irony of this? And I'm not answering that. That's heavy. Can you imagine the irony? Up to today, you had a ton of accusations against me, which are all false, but it's coordinated. Moses says one thing, and I see Freddie Kisoon and a couple of others. I just showed something saying the same thing. It's coordinated on a single topic. You can't ask me for evidence. I've been accused by Kiteshore News of owning the Marriott Hotel shares. I've been accused by Kiteshore News of owning an airline. I've been accused by Kiteshore News of owning a block of apartments in New York. I've been accused by Kiteshore News of owning the Hope Canal even. Everything, almost every single thing of having big bank accounts abroad, you know? Where is any evidence, even a shred of evidence? And you're asking me about that. Oh, let me pass on that one. What are the two others? I missed the first two. Sorry.
I also asked you for evidence.
Yeah.
Crime is escalating rapidly.
Oh, yes. And I said, you heard what I said, that we've heard explanations from this government that the crime rate is under control. We've heard the minister, the president, the commissioner of police, etc. I said, we have seen these things happening, which is factual. People, hotels being robbed and hospitals and different people. And then I spoke of the psycho fund. On one hand, part of the government is saying there is no increase in crime, and this psycho fund says that there has been an increase in crime because people who are working in the drug trade now don't have jobs, so they have to turn to crime. I was saying how the government itself gives two explanations in their desire to spin things in a particular way. They sometimes create confusion, dissent, diametrically opposed views. So he is speaking about an increase in crime because of people moving out of drug trade into crime now, which is, I don't know what evidence he has of that. But this is the spokesperson for the government, for the Prime Minister's office, saying this. You ask him about that. Don't ask me. And so that is what I'm saying. And then he spins about this narco economy. But you know what? When they do this, they do our job, the opposition's job. Every time they run down the country and say, oh, we are a narco economy, a few more people say, hold on a minute. Let's let the banks, we don't want correspondent relations with this narco economy. Because here is the president and the spokesperson for the prime minister saying, this is a narco economy. So why would we want to expose ourselves to a whole range of risks, prudential risks, etc., money laundering risks, by dealing with an economy that is tiny compared to the asset base of those banks? So let's cut correspondent relations. And then Jordan speaks about de-risking. Jordan speaks about de-risking. Who do you think giving fuel to the de-risking? Now, de-risking is happening generally across developing countries. But they're accelerating the process in Guyana by these public officials saying these things. When another one accused, I think, was it Clive Thomas or who was it that said Republic Bank? Somebody said that Republic Bank was engaged in money laundering. It was in the Kiteshore News. Yes. Was it Clive Thomas? Clive Saru. Imagine Saru saying that. The Asset Recovery Unit saying the biggest bank in terms of assets in Guyana is engaged in money laundering practices. The head of Saru, this is from office of the president. What do you expect will happen? They shoot themselves in the foot all the time, not only in terms of correspondent relations, but in terms of investment flows, because they think somehow they're hurting the PPP.
Sir, just a quick correction.
And so-
SARO didn't say that they are engaged in money laundering activities. They said they'll carry out an investigation to ascertain whether they're involved in the activities.
Yeah, okay. The Vulcan thing, it got spun by Kaichor as engagement. That was the, it got spun by Kaichor News, well, if that's what Saru
No,
said.
that's what's published.
But that was the headline. You understand, the headline, a bank under, all right, a bank under investigation for money laundering by a unit in the office of the president that is involved in asset recovery. What does it do to the country and to the reputation of that bank? What about if the next day every single Guyanese had gone and pulled their money out of the bank, and you had a run on the banking system that then caused a collapse of the entire financial system? Luckily, the people at Republic Bank fought it, and I hope that they sue all the people involved, personally too, because it's not true. It wasn't true. And they use some ministers' involvement, or because some ministers, let me don't go on to that too much. And what was the first one? Question?
What is your solution to the economic slowdown?
What's my solution to the economic slowdown? There are lots of things that could be done. But first of all, it is the government having a matrix that allows development, that is infused with the philosophy of growth and development. And to strain out of this matrix extraneous issues that could harm that objective. So it is defining a matrix. That's first of all. This matrix has to be composed of consistent, clear policies to investors. That's the first thing. What you have now is every single minister commenting on issues that could harm the investment environment. So it must be clear. I'm going to just talk broadly about it because I can go into details, but I don't want to do so at this press conference. So that's one. A consistent set of policies which include incentives, etc. Two, that there must be uniform applicability of the policies. So, not if you're pro-PPP, like what Trotman said. Oh, the cabinet was not in the mood to give Ramroop the contract for the bond, although it was 70,000 square feet and the other one is 4,000 square feet, and his was 16 million and that was 12 million. So although the cost was what? 15 times less nearly. We were not in the mood to give Ramroop. You can't be in the mood, politicians. You have a fiduciary responsibility. There are many people we were not happy with, who were opposed to us politically, but they won contracts. They won contracts, they survived, they did well. Uniformity and applicability. Three, the Minister of Finance focusing more on growth rather than managing for ratios. So I think if those things happen, clear guidelines to investors, uniformity in application of those guidelines, and an enabling budgetary environment supporting growth initiatives, that you can you can do well in an economy like ours. And I can disaggregate those three into hundreds of examples and policies. Like, I made it clear that within the first 24 hours of the PPP resuming office, there are already 22 things that I have seen that we'll have to reverse. Within the first 24 hours of resuming office, there are 22 things immediately we'll have to reverse. And that's still counting, it's growing. One time it was 18, now it's gone up to 22. And I think long before the end of this term, it will even go higher. But within 24 hours, we will reverse.
Some days after first of
At some point in time, I'll let you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that will lend itself to growth, development, again, resumption of growth and development. These are not political things. I don't mean going after people like they are, like this persecution or witch hunting. I'm talking about initiatives that are economic in nature that will lead to the resumption of growth and development. Economic things. I'm not talking about political issues here. Although there are some of those two that we probably have to do in the first month.
To one of the persons who are supporters of the party, they would want to hear what is it that you have for them.
This is not a sprint. This is not a sprint. This is not a marathon too. This is a middle distance race. Middle distance race. Yeah. All right. You already Kaichur. Any other group? First, yes. Marcia. And then I come. Not discrimination. Yeah. You had 4. Kaichur News had 5 actually. All right. No. Let me go with Marcia.
I wanted to probe on if you could even just give us one. Because it seems something quite daring to say 24 hours, 22.
Yeah. And we do it.
For 22, can you just give us 2?
And maybe another time. Another time.
Oh my.
But I'm looking at that.
Oh, you were going to say something?
No.
I didn't quite understand. You were saying that they're doing our job for us. When you were talking about investors pulling out and all of that, I didn't quite get what you meant.
The traditional role of the opposition has always been about, making the government look less competent than it would be. And they are making themselves do that. We don't need to do anything. We don't need to prove that. They're proving it by their daily actions. So that's what I meant. That the traditional role of an opposition is to say, hold on a minute, we can deal with these issues better than you can. We can create an economy that is growing, we can generate more jobs, we can give a bigger profile to the country globally, we can create more social capital, that sort of thing. Safety in people's homes, etc. That's what I meant. They are, by their incompetence and the attitude, oblivious to criticism. So the president comes to the parliament and acts as though none of these tens of scandals have hit his government in the last year and a half. He's totally oblivious to all of these scandals, not oblivious, but just ignores them, and then lectures us on accountability. He ignores what people are calling out for, the demand of people that they pay more attention to safety, and then talks about how many people are murdered under the PPP and all of that sort of thing.
So in your own estimation, you believe that the current government is self-imploding and
No, if you want to write that, I would agree with you. But don't say Jagdeo said it. I think many people have their own agendas. And some of them some of them have decided that they're going to probably use this period to set themselves up. So maybe I shouldn't say more, because a lot will emerge. We've been pacing ourselves too. A lot of things, you saw this lack of transparency, they're not giving explanations, and a lot more will come out when that comes out and it exposes the inner workings of this government. The country will be shocked. You saw the vicious response to what was a routine audit by the Auditor General. A routine audit that pointed out so many transgressions that were also considered transgressions under the PPP. And they're now being fixed, but the answer is, an attack on the Auditor General himself. And but a lot of those things. So we can get answers still, and I hope the Auditor General will get the answers about who the people were that gave in donations over $700 million to a group of people who were doing the Durban Park project. The donations, nobody knows about it. And a lot more will come out in that regard. The overpayment of contractors already, large sums overpaid to contractors, a whole range of things, the abuse of the contingency fund. You see that, the same thing that they said, was abuse of the contingency fund. The things that they campaign on, which is to transfer the Lotto fund and all of these other funds into the consolidated fund. They have not done it. And this was one of the biggest things. Every day you saw them pontificating about how we were keeping this money outside the consolidated fund to steal. They have not transferred the money. None of those resources. They're just sitting there, large pools of resources that they can use to do much more. But they're keeping it in those funds. So.
And my final question on guys,
Sure.
you were pointing to
Okay.
their
Yeah.
not getting an increase in salary, but overall, I want to know, do you, as leader of the opposition and being an economist particularly, do you support the continuation of the $1 billion bailout to Lesotho?
We did it. I don't know if you listened to my speech in Parliament. I looked at Greenwich affidavit when we had the green mining construction arbitration. And he said that we had spent in the 80s $220 million to help bauxite. And I moved the $220 million from $1980 to $2015. And that works out in today's terms, over $1.5 billion. Over 1.5 billion US, which is over 300 billion Guyana dollars. And that was not the end, that was only for a period. We then went on to continue subsidizing, that was only up to a point. The Linden community, we spent $2 billion a year in electricity. If you add up all the money that we've spent just to subsidize electricity for Linden in the period of the PPP, it dwarfs the contributions we have made to Gaisuko now. So we have to, and this industry is facing hard times, and a lot of lives depend on it. So what we have said is that you'd have to support the industry through the difficult times, but it will resume profitability. I'm convinced about that. It can resume profitability, but you don't have the social dislocations, which often is more costly. the social dislocations and the economic problems because of precipitous, unthinking action. So take, for example, Wales. Let's look at Wales. You take out 1,700 people lose their jobs immediately. Okay? You then, that's directly. You had about another 600 who work with the private cane farmers. They lose their jobs. The investments that the private cane farmers made will disappear. The shopkeepers and everyone else, that's the biggest source of disposable income. Think about which other big activity from the Harbour Bridge all the way up to past Wales. Nothing else. What are you going to tell those people, the shopkeepers, the market people, the taxi drivers, etc.? It will cost you more than the 1.7 billion you said it will take to keep Wales open. But you can find this money to make a deal with DDL. And nobody is talking about that. That's the alternative. If you're going to give up, I noticed the president talked a lot about that. But he was under no obligation to do a settlement with DDL. Why would it not be money better spent in that area? To keep people, and these are not supporters of the People's Progressive Party alone, it's an entire community. It is short term. And by the way, was it not this government that said that the PPP encouraged too many rice farmers to produce too much when there are no markets? And suddenly, it is this government that is now moving to produce more rice. What kind of logic is this? What kind of logic is this? It's the silliest thing. But I heard that there are some private people, and let's look out for the people who are going to get the contracts now from Gaisuko to do the rice. They were even thinking about giving out some lands there. So that is something you should ask Clive Thomas about. Who are going to get the contracts and the land? Because they've been, quite a few people have been going in to see them, from what we heard, to get some of the lands there. Yes, please. No. Oh, yes, Gary, you were there. Go with Vanessa. Vanessa.
No, I was just, you answered my question. Report. That's what I was going to ask you.
Okay, all right. Gary, no.
On the injury, I was wondering